If stories like this move you, hit like and subscribe before you read another word. New stories every week about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. This is a story about what happens when a man with a lease and a set of keys decides, in 5 minutes, that he already knows everything he needs to know about the woman standing at his door. When small power operates without oversight and without consequence, until it does. When the person you humiliate in the rain on a Thursday evening turns out to be connected to the person who determines whether your building passes inspection next month. And when the truth arrives not loudly but quietly, the way it always does when it has been patient long enough. She was standing on the front steps with 2 garbage bags and a 7-year-old when the rain started. Not a drizzle. A proper rain. The kind that comes in from the east in late October in this part of the country with a specific intention, cold and heavy and relentless. The kind that soaks through a coat in 4 minutes and through a child's sneakers in 2. Her daughter Maya had her backpack on and was holding a stuffed rabbit she had carried everywhere since she was 3 years old, and she was trying very hard not to cry because her mother had asked her once, very quietly, in the moments before. The door closed, to be brave for just a little while. Her name was Celeste Washington. She was 34 years old, a nursing assistant working 40 hours a week at a long-term care facility across town, raising Maya alone since her marriage ended 3 years ago. She had lived in apartment 4B of the Caldwell Street building for 22 months. She had paid her rent on time 21 of those 22 months. The 1 month she was late, September 4 weeks ago, she had been late by 6 days because her car had needed a repair she had not anticipated, and the repair cost had come out of the same account the rent came out of, and she had called the management office before the due date to explain and to confirm that she would have the full amount plus the late fee within the week. She had the full amount plus the late fee within the week. She had a receipt for it. The landlord of record for the Caldwell Street building was a man named Frank Elroy, 61 years old. He owned 7 rental properties in the city, all of them in neighborhoods where the tenants had fewer options and less institutional knowledge than in other parts of town, and he managed all 7 with the specific philosophy of a man who had learned that a certain category of tenant could be treated in ways that a different category could not, because the first category did not know how to push back or did not believe it would matter if they did. He had been doing this for 19 years. He had not been significantly wrong about this yet. He had shown up at 4B that Thursday evening without prior written notice. He had knocked. Celeste had opened the door with Maya standing behind her and dinner still on the stove and a sink full of dishes from breakfast that she had not gotten to yet because she had worked a double shift and gotten home 40 minutes ago. Frank Elroy had looked at the apartment. He had looked at the dishes. He had looked at a small water stain on the ceiling near the bathroom that had been there when Celeste moved in and that she had reported in writing twice without receiving a response. He had looked at Maya's shoes by the door and the art supplies, on the kitchen table and the 3 baskets of laundry that had not yet been folded because Celeste had not yet had 40 consecutive minutes of non-work, non-child time in the past 2 weeks in which to fold them. He had told her she was in violation of her lease. Improper maintenance of the unit. He had a document in his hand. He told her she had 30 minutes to gather her essential belongings and vacate the premises. Celeste had told him that this was not legal. She had told him she had not received written notice of any violation. She had told him that a landlord could not remove a tenant without a court order in this state, and that she knew her rights under the tenant protection ordinances the city had passed the previous year. Frank Elroy had told her that her lease contained specific maintenance clauses that she was in violation of, and that those clauses superseded standard tenant protections, and that if she did not vacate voluntarily, he would call the police and have her removed, and that the police response time in this area was quite fast, and he had a good relationship with the precinct. He was lying about the lease clauses. He was not lying about his relationship with the precinct. Celeste had looked at Maya. Maya was looking at her mother, with the specific and attentive expression of a 7-year-old who understands that something serious is happening and is waiting to understand from her mother's face whether she should be frightened. Celeste had taken a breath. She had taken Maya's hand. She had put their coats on. She had put Maya's backpack on Maya's back. She had packed 2 garbage bags with what she could reach quickly: Maya's clothes, her own uniform for work, medication, documents, the folder she kept in the kitchen drawer that had lease copies and rent receipts and every piece of paper connected to this apartment, because she had learned from her mother, who had learned from her grandmother, that certain women in certain situations could not afford to not have their paperwork. She had walked out. She had not cried in front of Frank Elroy. She had not raised her voice. She had told him clearly that what he was doing was illegal and that she intended to pursue every legal remedy available to her. He had not responded to this. He had closed the door behind them, and now she was on the front steps with 2 garbage bags, and Maya and the rabbit and the rain. She took out her phone. She had 42% battery. She called her mother first. Her mother lived 40 minutes away and did not have a car, and the bus did not run to her street after 8, and it was 7:43. She called her friend Denise next. Denise was home and willing, but had 3 children of her own in a 2-bedroom apartment, and the logistics of the next few hours were already assembling themselves in Celeste's mind in the way that the logistics of impossible situations assemble when you have been managing impossible situations long enough to know how. Then she called her brother. She did not call her brother first because calling her brother required something from her that the other calls did not. Not because he would not help. He would help immediately and completely. She had known this her whole life. But because calling her brother meant admitting to him what had happened and where she was standing and what her daughter was experiencing at this moment. And there was something in her, something precise and old, and specifically hers, that made asking for help from the people who loved her the hardest thing she did. She called him. He answered on the second ring. "Where are you?" he said. He always said this when she called at unexpected hours instead of hello, because he had learned over 34 years of being her brother that an unexpected call from Celeste meant something needed his immediate attention, and that what needed his immediate attention was always her location first. She told him. She told him all of it. She told it in the flat, factual way. She told things when she was holding herself together very carefully, which he also recognized from 34 years of knowing her. He was quiet for approximately 4 seconds. Then he said, "I am sending a car right now. You and Maya are going to my house tonight. Do not move from where you are standing. I will call you back in 2 minutes." He called back in 90 seconds with the car details. Her brother's name was David Washington. He was 39 years old. He had grown up in the same house Celeste had grown up in the same neighborhood, with the same parents, doing the same calculations that children do when they understand early that the distance between where they are and where they want to be requires a specific and sustained kind of effort that cannot be interrupted or deferred. He had worked. He had studied. He had made choices that accumulated over 20 years into a life that looked from the outside like success and that felt from the inside like the ongoing and never quite finished project of becoming someone who could protect the people he loved. He was the mayor of the city. He had been elected 14 months ago. He did not talk about it much with Celeste, because Celeste was not particularly interested in the political dimension of his work. She was interested in him, in David, in the brother who had driven her to prom and taught her to parallel park, and called her every Sunday evening for 20 years. The title was real, but between the two of them, it was always secondary to the fact. Frank Elroy did not know that Celeste Washington's brother was the mayor. There was no reason he would have known this. Celeste did not share her brother's last name in any professional or public context because she had been married when the previous administration began and had taken her husband's name and had kept it after the divorce because it was Maya's name and she wanted them to share it. She had never mentioned her brother to Frank Elroy or to anyone connected to the Caldwell Street building. The connection did not exist in any document or record that Frank Elroy had access to. The car arrived in 11 minutes. A man Celeste recognized from David's staff opened the umbrella before he opened the car door. Maya got in first. Celeste handed him the 2 garbage bags and got in. The door closed. The rain continued on the empty steps. Celeste and Maya arrived at David's house at 8:30. His wife had dinner reheated and Maya's temporary bedroom set up with the particular efficiency of a household that had anticipated the visit in the 40 minutes between the call and the arrival. Maya ate. She bathed. She was asleep by 9:15 with the rabbit in the specific way of a child whose body has decided that the frightening part of the day is over and that it is safe now to let go. Celeste sat at the kitchen table with David and told him everything. Again, more slowly this time, with the documents from the folder spread on the table between them. David read each document. He read the lease. He read the receipts. He read the written maintenance requests she had submitted twice about the ceiling stain. He read the late payment notice from September and the receipt confirming full payment with late fee received and acknowledged. He sat with the documents. For a moment after he had read them all, then he made 3 phone calls. The first was to the city's tenant legal services office, an after-hours line staffed specifically because tenant emergencies do not observe business hours. The second was to the city attorney's office. The third was to the director of the city's housing inspection division. He made all 3 calls in Celeste's presence because he wanted her to understand what was happening and to be part of every decision. He did not make decisions on her behalf. He made calls that connected her to the people and processes that should have been accessible to her already, that were legally accessible to her already, but that a woman standing in the rain with 2 garbage bags and a 7-year-old at 7:43 on a Thursday evening did not have the bandwidth to navigate alone. The following morning, 3 things happened in sequence. The first was that a tenant rights attorney from the city's legal services office called Celeste at 8:15 and told her that Frank Elroy's removal of her from the apartment was unlawful on 4 separate grounds, that she had the right to immediate re-entry under the tenant protection ordinances the city had passed the previous year, and that the legal services office would represent her at no cost in any proceedings that followed. The second was that the city's housing inspection division opened a formal inspection file on all 7 of Frank Elroy's properties, triggered by a complaint about the Caldwell Street building. A complaint that referenced, among other things, an unaddressed ceiling water stain that had been reported in writing by a tenant twice without any response from the property management office. The inspection of the Caldwell Street building was scheduled for the following week. The inspections of the other 6 properties were scheduled for the 3 weeks after that. The third was that Frank Elroy received a certified letter from the city attorney's office informing him that his removal of a tenant from apartment 4B of the Caldwell Street building on the previous evening appeared to constitute an illegal eviction under city ordinance and state law, that the tenant in question had retained legal counsel through the city's tenant legal services office, and that the city's housing inspection division had opened a formal review of all properties under his management. Frank Elroy made several calls that morning to people he believed could help him navigate the situation. None of them were able to help him in the ways he was accustomed to being helped. Celeste returned to apartment 4B on Friday afternoon with the tenant rights attorney and a locksmith the attorney had arranged. The locks had been changed, unlawfully, during the night. The locksmith opened the door. Celeste and Maya walked back in. The dishes were still in the sink from Thursday morning. The dinner she had been making was still on the stove, cold. She turned on the kitchen light and looked at the apartment, her apartment, and she stood there for a moment before she started cleaning. Maya went to school on Friday. She told her teacher she had had a sleepover at her uncle's house. Her teacher asked if it was fun. Maya said yes, her aunt had made pancakes. Both of these things were true. Frank Elroy's properties were inspected over the following 4 weeks. The Caldwell Street building alone generated 31 code violations. The other 6 buildings generated a combined 114. The violations ranged from minor to significant. Several were the kind that required immediate remediation. Frank Elroy spent the following 3 months managing the remediation requirements, the legal fees from Celeste's lawsuit, which he eventually settled, and the city's ongoing compliance monitoring of all 7 properties. He did not have a good relationship with the precinct anymore. The precinct had its own compliance review underway following a separate inquiry into the pattern of calls they had received from Elroy properties over the preceding years. None of this was directed by David Washington in any personal or improper way. He had made 3 phone calls on a Thursday evening that connected his sister to processes and offices that existed for exactly this purpose and that were available to every tenant in the city. The processes and offices had done what they were designed to do. The fact that Celeste had not known how to access them alone was its own problem, one that David addressed 6 months later by establishing a tenant emergency line that was publicized in every public housing office and community center in the city, staffed around the clock, and designed specifically for the woman standing in the rain with 2 garbage bags who does not know who to call. Celeste stayed in apartment 4B. She negotiated a new lease directly with the property management company following Frank Elroy's, required divestment of 2 of his worst-performing buildings as part of the settlement agreement. The lease was clear, fair, and documented correctly in every particular. Maya still has the rabbit. She does not talk much about Thursday evening. Children are better at leaving things behind them than adults are, which is either a gift or a survival mechanism depending on how you look at it. Celeste calls her brother every Sunday. He always answers. He always asks where she is first, before hello, because that is what 39 years of being her brother has taught him to ask. She is always somewhere safe. She has made sure of that. She has been making sure of that since. She was a girl, and she intends to keep making sure of it for the rest of her life and for Maya's. The truth has a way of surfacing. Even when a landlord changes the locks on a Thursday night and tells himself he has solved his problem. Even when the rain is cold and the steps are wet and a 7-year-old is trying very hard to be brave, the truth surfaces. In the certified letter, in the 31 code violations, in the tenant emergency line that went live 6 months later so that the next woman standing in the rain would have somewhere to call before she had to call her brother. It surfaces. It always does. It always will. Hit like. It helps more than you know. Subscribe and hit the bell. We tell stories like this every single week. Share this today with someone who needs to be reminded that power is most dangerous when it operates without oversight, and most accountable when someone finally pays attention. And leave a comment. Have you ever been in a situation where knowing the right person or the right process changed everything? Tell me. You deserve to be heard. See you in the next one.